I am very excited this morning to share with you some reflections on the transformative potential of human rights-based approaches, as well as the promise the human rights-based approach holds to advance tobacco control, as well as challenge the tobacco industry's practices. I want to begin by reminding you that the evidence has never been clearer that women's empowerment and gender equality is not only a moral imperative, but has been now proved to have enormously important economic ramifications. This has been highlighted in the 2012 World Bank report on women and development. Therefore, a gender perspective animating the human rights-based approach to tobacco control will advance not just tobacco control, but also women's empowerment, and has that enormously powerful potential to transform both tobacco as well as women and human rights discourses. We meet at a very important moment in the history of our times. This is a time of revolutions and social change, which holds much promise as well as challenges to both women and human rights movements across the world. Right now, in the Arab region, as well as around the world, laws and practices and policies are being recast. So it's important for us to seize this moment to rethink tobacco control in the spirit of human rights discourse, as well as the human rights norms and frameworks. Tobacco is one of the greatest public health challenges of our times, and as the most important value of the human rights discourse is its vibrancy and its dynamism, the fact that it can be reconceptualized and reinvented to meet the most pressing challenges of our times. And that is why it holds the most cardinal importance to tobacco control today. The human rights-based approach sends a clarion call to action. It provides us with a powerful rhetoric and is a powerful tool as an organizing and galvanizing and mobilizing process to bring together diverse communities, to build alliances, to build bridges across and between different social movements, and to forge common cause on shared goals of tobacco control and human rights. I want to first start by looking at some of the ways in which the human rights-based approach can be transformed and translated into policy and practice. The first way in ensuring that human rights-based approach, as well as the human rights norms, are translated into domestic practice is through constitutional making and through lawmaking. The primacy of the human rights-based approach can be established through constitutional guarantees, as well as by enshrining it in tobacco control laws. Once this is enshrined in the preamble, at the very heart of tobacco control laws, you ensure the primacy of human rights norms in a tobacco control bill. And therefore, what you're ensuring is that if there is a conflict in the interpretation of those laws and norms, the human rights norms will prevail, given the primacy of human rights norms. Secondly, human rights norms can be used as an interpretive tool to fill in gaps as well as to clarify any conflict in the law. Thirdly, the reporting element under these treaty bodies provides you a very powerful mechanism and a tool to fill in the gaps in the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. And finally, I would like to refer once again to the powerful rhetoric of human rights to galvanize and mobilize communities. The vernacular of the human rights-based approach carries enormous potential and promise to transform communities and countries. And therefore, I urge you to use the human rights-based approach and the human rights language to animate, illustrate, and dramatize your powerful work on the ground. As I said, I will be looking at the human rights-based approach primarily from a gender perspective. And in doing so, what I would like to do is to refer to some of the CEDAW Convention guarantees enshrined in the Convention and look at how the indicators under the CEDAW Convention guarantees can be transformed through a tobacco control lens. So the indicators and the determinants of meeting the CEDAW's obligations can be looked at from a tobacco control perspective. For example, both the CEDAW as well as the FTC must guide lawmaking and the promulgation of the laws, the implementation of these laws. Under Article 2, which is the bedrock of the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, which is widely known as the Bill of Rights for Women, the guarantees of equal protection, or the anti-discrimination clause, goes to the very heart of tobacco control. For example, looking at some of the indicators of these human rights guarantees, the equal protection guarantees, some of the indicators can be this. Women should have equal access to knowledge, information, and programs on tobacco. And all programs on tobacco must be animated by a gender perspective. Thirdly, women must be at the helm of tobacco control. Women must be represented fairly and fully as decision makers in tobacco control. For long, men have been at the helm at tobacco control decision making. It is time for women to claim their space, to claim their place at the decision making table, so that their perspectives, women's experiences, guide tobacco control policy making and practice, so that women bring their deeply felt needs, their deeply felt experiences, and are able to articulate the ways in which tobacco impacts their life, their security, their family lives, their employment rights, so that those perspectives, those stories and narratives animate the tobacco control policies and practices and programs that are developed in your communities and your countries. So the decision-making powers of women, both in the public and private sphere, go to the very heart of tobacco control. One of the determinants, the most important determinant of development today is women's decision-making powers in the home. And the tobacco industry preys on women's general powerlessness and women's lack of equal decision-making powers in the home, in the way in which tobacco is marketed, and the way in which secondhand smoke disproportionately impacts women and the girl child. Within a milieu of powerlessness, women have less control and have less agency to control their families' decision-making powers. Therefore, seeing tobacco control within a framework, within a context of gender inequality, will help to advance gender as well as tobacco control policies. And it will mutually reinforce women's empowerment and tobacco control. Finally, under Article 2, what we see is that women are disproportionately concentrated as caregivers when it comes to illness due to tobacco. And that once again disadvantages, subordinates, disempowers women socially, personally, and economically, and has enormous developmental costs and economic burdens on the individual, on the family, the community, and the country. So once again, bringing an equal protection lens, a gender analysis to tobacco control is pivotal and key to advancing tobacco control in your communities and your countries. I would also like to look very quickly at Article 10. Mary pointed out that when women and the girl child are concentrated in tobacco agriculture as well as in tobacco manufacture in beedi rolling, women and girls do not have equal access to schools. I want to build on that, but go beyond that, to look at the promise of Article 10 on the CEDAW. Article 10's indicators call for equal access to all programs, equal access to similar curriculums, equal access to similar teaching methodologies. In most parts of our world, we see that education is gender segregated. And because of that segregation, programs, curricula, as well as experiences and training programs that are devoted to the male child do not have the same kind of resonance to the girl child. So it is important firstly to bring a gender perspective to all of the curricula, the programs that are developed on behalf of tobacco control, but also it's critical that all programs on tobacco control, all educational and training programs on tobacco control are equally available to the girl child as well as the male child, and that the girls have full, free, and equal access to all educational processes, including educational and training processes on tobacco control. So that is the promise of Article 10 of the CEDAW. Now, at the very heart of the CEDAW Convention is Article 5, which once again has enormous resonance to tobacco control. Article 5 is a revolutionary article because for the first time, international law calls for the dismantling of cultural and social stereotypes, as well as gender biases that disadvantage and subordinate women and the girl child. Now, as most of you are aware and unfortunately familiar with, the tobacco industry preys on women's subordination and the stereotypical images of women, the way in which marketing practices as well as advertising practices manipulate women's bodies and show glamorized and sexualized images of women in the sale, marketing, and consuming of tobacco. Now, these distorted images are not only false, but they also stereotype women and commodify women. So this commodification of women go to the very heart of Article 5 of the CEDAW and violate the spirit and the letter of the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. So it is very important when you are reporting under the CEDAW Convention that you not only focus on the health effect of tobacco on women, but the way in which women, the portrayal of women in the media, in the portrayal of women in advertising and in marketing of tobacco has enormous negative ramifications on women's equality. And that goes to the very heart of tobacco control too. And to illustrate this analysis, I see Mr. Homshestra here in the audience. He is from the Nepalese Non-Smokers Association. A couple of years ago when the CEDAW shadow report was being drafted in Nepal and 125 women's organizations came together in this glorious coming together to draft one of their critical shadow reports. Mr. Homshestra led the movement to bring a tobacco control perspective to the CEDAW committee under this very article, where he brought to the focus the ways in which the tobacco industry highlighted women's bodies as a vehicle to sell tobacco. And that was an enormously powerful articulation of the way in which tobacco subordinates women and disempowers women. I want to look again at some of the ways in which tobacco control correlates with poverty. Around the world, the face of poverty is often that of a woman. And this feminization of poverty is so critical to the Millennium Development Goals. And you see the correlation between the Millennium Development Goals and tobacco control, and this tobacco control is relevant to every one of the 8 goals, but mostly relevant to goal number 1, which is the eradication of extreme poverty and hunger. We see around the world in countries, communities, and families where resources are scarce, when money and economic resources are diverted to tobacco, it is often women and the girl child who is disadvantaged. As you know, around the world, women and the girl child are often last in line for health care, for education, and for food security. So when